Welcome back, everyone, to the Blueprint, a Project Stand podcast. We have a group interview today because we are coming at you with exciting news about the grant that we won and what we're doing with the money. So we're going to start off with introductions. My name is Valencia Johnson, one of your co-hosts for the podcast, and I work at Princeton University as the Student Life Archivist. And I figured we can all go around so we can introduce our voices and our faces to our audience. So how about Lael, you go first and then people can jump in.
Yes, we can pass the mic. Hi, everyone. My name is Lael Hughes-Watkins, founder of Project Stand. I get my checks, though, from University of Maryland as the university archivist there. And so at this time, I'm going to pass the mic to Keandra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Keandra Bills Freeman. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm also based at the University of Maryland with Lael. I was recently hired as the Project Stand coordinator, and I'm very excited for everything we have in store. Okay, Holly, I'm passing it to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Holly Smith. I am the college archivist at Spelman College in Atlanta and have the pleasure of serving on the Project Stand Advisory Board as well, and thrilled to be here. And last but not least, I will toss it to Sarah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Tanner, and I am the head of the Archives Research Center at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. The library has been a member of Project Stand since its inception, and for this project, I serve as co-PI along with Lael on the Mellon grant that Project Stand received.
All right, excellent. And so we are going to catch everyone up for our new listeners and viewers about the history of Project Stand. And so just to anyone in the group, how did Project Stand start?
So I'll take that one. So we officially launched in the summer of 2017. A co-founder, Ohio State University, the head of special collections art and the university archivist there, Tamar Shute. Really at this time, probably starting in 2016, starting the formation brainstorming about Project Stand. I was at Kent State University at that time, where I was a university archivist there. And I'm seeing all this activism on campus around racial injustice, specifically around Ferguson. We're having die-ins on campus. I'm hearing about organizing happening on Twitter. I didn't have a Twitter account. What is this Twitter? Like my grandparents, what is this Twitter? What are these tweets? And knowing that that's where students were organizing in these digital spaces and not like what I was traditionally trained in as far as, oh, they're putting up flyers or they're putting their demands in this student paper. None of that wasn't happening at all, but they were using these platforms to call to arms for people to come and join them in these direct actions on campus. And so also at that time, being aware there were disparities in our archiving practices with the histories of Black folks at Kent State University from the 60s and 70s and forward. So I was just like, well, we were struggling documenting social justice movement on campus at that time, then I'm worried that we're not doing a good job now, especially with that kind of organizing and the documentation of sorts happening on social media. And so, and also not having strong relationships with our BIPOC communities, our student orgs on campus. So I wanted to think about like, how do we build these relationships? What community and or tools can we create to create these relationships and to show that we can be partners with these student organizations in preserving their narratives and their stories and the work that they're doing. And knowing that I want to create some kind of centralized location online for what resources were out there as far as primary records, archival records, and then, you know, hoping to get folks interested in creating and adding to those resources. So I reached out to, as I said, to Tamar. she's like, yeah, I'm having the same issues and concerns. And so, you know, it kind of went on from there, and, you know, won't get too way later in details, but that's how Project Stand was born. Primarily thought it was going to be an Ohio-based thing for a little while, but then it quickly expanded beyond that with Jackson State University, our first non-Ohio institution, also HBCU, so just totally was excited about that. And we rolled from there and quickly started to have a lot of other institutions who were having similar conversations and became very interested in our work.
And speaking of HBCUs and the collaboration that they've had with Project Stan, we have two representatives from Spelman and AUC. Can you speak about your own work in student organizing documentation as it relates to being on a HBCU campus?
You go for it, Holly.
Okay, great minds think alike. Well, I've known about Project Stand for quite a number of years before officially joining. Just again, the really critical and important work that Lael herself has done beyond Project Stand, just thinking about ethical community archiving, documentation, but really it was just refreshing to just see documenting student activism, current alumni, and thinking about how to do that, to provide support for students, I think independent of administration and even institution, was so critical. I've been at Spelman for the past 7 years, but there's been a long legacy of student activism, certainly on the campus. And again, thinking about contemporary students and activism. The Spelman Archives are actually part of the Women's Research and Resource Center, which houses the Comparative Women's Studies program, and really is the center of the progressive radical activity on campus. And the archives, we're actually a part of the Women's Center. So we have the fortune to be connected to a lot of the radical progressive student organizations anyway, who tend to be the most involved in student activism, but as well through the college archives, we reach out to, have been reaching out and doing a lot of, I guess, what's outreach to students about the type of materials they have, how to preserve it, what to preserve. And I think it's been just a really refreshing conversation to know that, the Spelman Archives are not just interested in just a top-down administrative documentation approach. And I think this is critical overall, but especially thinking about the significance HBCUs have had in student activism, this protest and being a hotbed of activity, but also documenting the lives and work of not just the institution, but typically the Black communities connected to it. And you can really see the connection of students with community activism through the 60s and beyond when we think about, contemporary protests against state-sanctioned violence, against Black and brown bodies, transphobia, the homophobia that exists and the students have experienced on and off campus. So a long way of saying that it's just been this particular Mellon funded grant project is just a really wonderful way to, I think, institutionalize the relationships that we've had at Spelman with Project Stand and with student activists on Spelman's campus in the AUC and beyond. And I'm just really excited about continuing to learn from each other and our colleagues, particularly through the residency programs and working with the students.
Yeah, so as Holly mentioned, the AUC has been well known for its student activism. And even in our collections, we had a lot of historical collections representing that student activism. So we had the Atlanta Student Movement collection that started the first initial sit-ins in 1960, and students were really leading the way in some of what we were considering the modern civil rights movement. But what we noticed around the same time, Lael was mentioning that she started taking note of some of the student activism happening. We did a survey of our collections, and what we found was what was missing, especially most recently in our current iterations of collections, were student voices. I think there's a lot of things that contributed to that. I think that the fact that a lot of the student activism is happening online in this way that we were not used to collecting records contributed to that. And I think that a lot of times the students which, you know, is not at the forefront of student activist minds to be thinking about, well, maybe I should give my records to an institution. That's not something that people are thinking about. So what we realized that as memory workers and as professionals, what we could do is be more proactive in our approach to documenting student activism and to working directly with student activist groups. And becoming more partners than sort of an institutional repository, right? So something that's sort of separate from our students, or something that would, Holly mentioned this, you know, we have an administrative down approach, you know, like this is a place for presidential records and for civil rights leaders and all of those kinds of things. It is, but it's also a place for our students on campus as well. And we realized that, you know, we need to be making ourselves more visible. We need to be inviting students into the library to use the space as meeting rooms, for event space, to have open conversations with one another, and to really approach this more proactively as a partnership approach, rather than a lot of times what we consider archival documentation, which feels a little more one-sided towards the institution coming in and telling people how they should preserve their records, and then asking for those records to be physically deposited in an archive setting. So in this way, we started going on campus more, going to events, engaging with students more. And I found that to be one of the more rewarding aspects of this more proactive approach that we were taking, was hearing directly from students and hearing how they felt about documenting their student activism and keeping a record of it. And once it was introduced, a lot of these student groups and student activist workers were very open to the idea of both preserving it within their own group in a more collaborative approach and working directly with the archive. And I think that has been beneficial. So now we have several new just born digital student activist groups that Holly has worked directly with a lot of students as well. And we've taken this collaborative approach to documenting some student activism across the AUC campuses. And I think Project Stand came about at the exact right time that we were, you know, really starting to consider what was missing from the narrative, the historical narrative too.
Those are such beautiful answers, and like bringing the students into the archive, but also working in partnership and having equity on that, which is sometimes lost when you're dealing with students and the power dynamics that way. Speaking of bringing students in and events into the archive, the second year, 2018, we had a series of symposiums produced by Project Stand, and the first one was at AUC. And I was wondering if we could take a trip down memory road about how that symposium came about, and a little brief overview of what happened and what a symposium of Project Stand was like.
Yeah, I was just totally, first of all, that was our first grant. I mean, you know, we hadn't been around that long. We got an IMLS grant, was so thankful and appreciative of support from IMLS and them believing in our vision for what we wanted to do in our first stage of development. And so we wanted to do 4 symposiums around the country. The first one being at AUC Robert Woodruff Library, the second one being at University of Rhode Island and Chicago State University, and we ended at Arizona State University. And all 4 symposiums really went well. And the primary thing we tried to do in those symposiums was to center the voice of students in BIPOC communities. And Sarah kind of alluded to this earlier, but you know, again, and Holly alluded to this, we don't always, our work is so much focused on the administrative voice of our institution. So specifically carving out and creating a platform where we allow students from the BIPOC communities to speak about the work that they were doing, for us to hear from them directly, for them to tell us what they thought an archive was, or were they archiving their own work? Had they ever been to their institutional archive? What do they think about their own? Do they think about their own legacy that they're creating right now? Do they think about preserving their stories, and what resources and tools are they using? Do they think about issues with privacy? And so it was such a really rich conversation. I really applaud the students that AUC brought to the table, such a wonderful group of students that came to the table for our first inaugural symposium. And so we really heard, as we continue to have those symposiums, where we're unique to the geographical areas as well. So that was so important and critical to hear. And after we heard from the students, we were able to take what we were hearing and create an archiving student activism toolkit. We had an actual committee come together to do that work. And that archiving student activism toolkit has been the gateway for student organizers to actually reach out to us now, which I feel like that's a true testament to our work, and to how they can participate and work with us. They really find the archiving student activism toolkit really valuable because it's, it's not only for the archivist, but it's also for the student organizer, for them to think about what questions they should be asking the archivists at their institutions, allow them to think about what rights they have as content creators. Again, to think about what open source tools that they can utilize to document their digital content. It's a really rich and valuable resource, but we really have to acknowledge the students and the stories that they shared with us that allowed us to build that educational resource. And so it was really powerful to hear about the burnout that the students experience, to talk about the self-care that they want and was trying to do, as well as organizers. I remember one student saying that when they tried to attend a campus party, folks was looking at her like, what you doing here? It's like, you can't, like the idea that you can't turn it off and not, as we learn about organizing all the time. I was completely fascinated by that statement. I was fascinated by the point that a lot of the time students still see archives as gatekeepers, and that they still see this wall and don't always feel welcomed into these spaces. So again, that's something we have to continue to work on. And so just really, it shifted me and really going into gear about thinking about the ethical documentation of working with those student organizations, and how do we do that work and not cause harm to the very students that we're trying to work with. And so it's something that has stayed with me and has continued to propel me and inspire me to do the work. And just again, thankful for Sarah and Holly for being there, and that original group that set us forward with the work that has continued to grow since then.
And Sarah and Holly, I know you were there as well. Did you want to add anything?
I think just building off of what Leah said, again, it's always critical to continue, again, I say include the HBCU student experiences, not that there's one, in these dialogues of current and former student activists. And I think one of the most important things to that when we really consider, like you said, the students organizing again broadly against issues beyond the institution, but also pushing back against policies on campus. And I was just really elated to have the students like Eva Dickerson and Ramon Johnson, who've been very active in the AUC and on campus, as well as on the panels and discussions with students from other institutions, and just to really show the breadth of experiences and the breadth of student activism and organizing, and what that really looks like and conceives of, and how significant it was to have it in the Atlanta University Center Woodruff Library, which is the hub of intellectual inquiry, I would say, in the Atlanta University Center, the largest consortium of HBCUs broadly. So it was just a really refreshing and wonderful conversation. One of my friends and colleagues, Dr. Bahati Kaumba, who teaches in the women's studies class, bought her entire class, I think, for the duration. And, we're still talking about it a few years later. And again, Bahati I credit Dr. Kumba with being the one she is the advisor for the student organizations, but really helping to foster these conversations, really like Lael and Sarah were just saying, to change the narrative or thoughts about what archives are, what they look like, but instead of seeing us as one of my favorite lines to say is passive keepers of dead records, but we're very much in the process of collaboratively documenting and activating, these materials as stories and discussions and context change over time. And again, really seeing this as a collaborative relationship, so the students can feel they are empowered, but it can really be empowered in the construction of, the preservation and facilitation of archives related to current and past struggles, I would say, in organizing and just being very active in the role. I'm very happy to kind of help break down that notion of what archives or memory work really is and look like, and how we're all part of these collective stories. We might play different roles, but really seeing it as a kind of collaborative and co-optive experience. So it was just, and then the fact that there were symposia at different parts of the country to really broaden that conversation was just, really refreshing to again see how these, the similarities and differences among different type of student organizing can come together, and again how we as archivists or memory workers in the institution can better support them.
And I just want to give another shout out to Holly, because if I'm remembering correctly, Eva, who's just dope, Eva like laid it down. I have love for all those students. Eva just did an amazing job with just facilitating the conversation between her and Dr. Meredith Evans. But if I remember correctly, I believe Eva said, I may not trust the institute, but she trusts Holly. And like, I was like, yes, like that is true. So that, again, that just reminded me, even in my position, like, yes, students are having these, contentious relationships with their institutions, but I am still an individual. And if I can get the students and build that trust with the students, then that can change the game. That can change everything. And so I just really appreciated that statement from Eva, but just saying, I trust Holly, and she was my resident, I'll do it. But I just, and that was just a really clarifying moment for me when I heard Eva say that.
Well, I was literally about to say that, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was like, what I think this speaks to the space that Project Stand was able to create, both at this symposium and hopefully like going forward in our workshops and things that we're going to be doing with this grant. But what I found to be one of the most interesting and enlightening things was to hear students speak so frankly about their feelings towards their institutions and towards the idea of an archive and memory work, and even towards their own self-care. Just to have this space, I think, to hear students talk so openly and freely in front of professors and library staff and other students, to me felt like, Project Stand has now created sort of this safe space to have a discussion, so that way all these groups can come together and hear like what some of the issues are with this, which, like Holly mentioned, this is not, students on the AUC campuses and across Atlanta are not just doing activism work outside of the schools, but they're also doing activism work within the schools, right? So towards the administration of the schools. And when Eva said that, and then I think another student, they might have been from Emory, said that they just outright did not trust their institution. They just, I think the question was something like, do you feel comfortable or trust your institution? And they're like, no. And to me, I was like, oh, that was just so, it was just like, oh, wow, that's such a strong statement to make. And then, okay, now that we know this, we thought it, but now that we know it and we've heard it, what can we do as memory workers to help change that narrative? And maybe help change the profession even, and how we think about collecting records, or not be so proprietary, over the records that we keep and want and have in our institution, but maybe we should be looking more as a profession towards a collaborative model too. So I thought I'm glad you said that, Leah, because that was what I was thinking too.
Valencia, if I may just add on to what Sarah was saying, amen, because, another thing that we are doing, I think professionally, we might be informing the next generation. Well, we are, informing the next generation of memory workers, but knowing that we have students who are interested in past and archives and library science or museum curation, they are that next generation. So exactly what to everyone is saying, and what Sarah and Leo just amplified, that if we make the profession better and make these things, around radical empathy in the archives or equitable descriptive metadata, these are part of the regular conversation and not just side offs or once things, then we are helping to lay the foundation and bringing in, the progressive social justice minded memory workers. I literally was just having a conversation with another colleague who's one of the few Black women university librarians, and just talking about how her leadership to me is an exemplar of what does it mean to be an ethical, just leader. I can say who it was. It was Elaine Westbrooks at UNC, thinking of the things that she mitigated, but just how really important it is to have those types of models in leadership, and how, we find ourselves in these positions, and how, we can be leaders in that way. And again, thinking of, not a hierarchical model, but if we are leading in this profession, we can help make it better. And again, speaking of resources, and a shout out, want to give Valencia and our other colleagues at Project Stand, who put together that wonderful toolkit of guidance, because I remember distinctly being in another university where the students didn't trust anybody, the administration or the people really affiliated with the archives, because there was a lack of interest in not, and this was young Afro-Latina student. So it was really helpful to point her to resources that might exist just exterior to the institution, period, but that the student activists and organizers in that organization could use. So again, just wanting to shout out the, again, incredible work on that toolkit and that resource, and how I think it really, again, amplifies what we've been saying about, we just feel passionate and care about this just, beyond our institution. We care about, documenting historically underrepresented history broadly, and want to provide those resources.
And speaking of resources, everyone can go to stanarchives.com and look at videos of the past symposia at all 4 locations, and also get connected with the toolkit that we've been talking about as well. So you can, again, go down memory lane alongside us and watch those amazing conversations that we had. I'm going to jump a little bit forward so we can start talking about the grant, which Project Stand was awarded. It was $750,000. We got some shmoney. And I just want to say, what are the goals of the grant? And anyone can answer.
Well, the first goal was to hire our new project stand coordinator, Keandra Bills-Freeman. So I do want to make sure to give some of this floor to Keandra, because you have been part of the puzzle we have been waiting for. So just so glad to have Keandra on deck, but I'm going to stop singing her praises and let her make sure she has her time. But yeah, I'm so thankful she's here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and to be a part of this grant. I will pass it back to Leo to talk some more about the scope of the grant, but I am just really excited about the work that we are going to be able to do, and particularly with the micro grants and being able to provide resources directly to institutions is to help with the archiving of this very important historical information. And I will talk a little bit more about myself after in the next part, but I'll throw it back to Leo.
You're so modest. I hope you do make sure you talk about all your wonderfulness. But I want to make sure I get the full title, because our title for our grant is a bit long. Building Capacity, Ethical Documentation, Archiving of Student Activism in BIPOC Communities. So yes, we got word that we were getting this grant end of last year, like December. So we had to do our best to hit the ground running in January while we were looking for a project stand coordinator. But the goal of this grant is multiple stage, multi-functions. Right now we're in the throes of planning our first residency, which is archiving in Black, documenting the my brain is leaving me, documenting HBCUs and cross-cultural movements. And as Holly said earlier, just the importance of identifying and acknowledging the unique history and stories of HBCUs is critical. And I personally felt we hadn't really done a good job in that in Project Stand. So even though we had AUC as our inaugural space for our first symposium, like when we were still convening as a group, I just felt like, because of a good chunk, for folks who don't know, good chunk of Project Stand is PWIs. And so I just felt like, what was unique to HBCUs wasn't really being highlighted. And so I was so, again, thankful that AUC decided to be the PI for this grant, especially with everything that was going on last year with the another racial reckoning. They just made it even more important that we had a HBCU as the lead for this grant. But we're working on our first residency of 2, which is a virtual residency. We will have a small cohort of 6, being we felt that we could do the work we needed to do in an intimate group. This cohort is coming together to help build out the amazing toolkit that, as Holly mentioned earlier, Valencia was a lead on. And so we're going to be looking at issues of privacy as possible. One of the themes, looking at making sure students, again, know their rights for when you think about the relationship they're going to build with potentially their university archives. We learned that some students didn't even know you could have a takedown request. I mean, so it's a lot of information students need to be made aware of. So we're still generating what particular themes we're going to cover that we want the cohort to explore, but we're going to have 2 residencies. The second one, if the Delta variant or some new variant is on the horizon, we hope is going to be at AUC in the fall next year. We're also planning a couple workshops. Yes, fingers crossed. Planning a couple workshops with Doc Now, Burgess Jules. If you don't know, you need to know. So please look up Doc Now. Doc Now has really set the path for, to be honest, the work that Project Stand has done, because they were doing work about documenting social justice movements and ethical documentation of social media, content that's on social media. And it's just exploded to have some very rich conversations, and really are the thought leaders when we think about the ethical documentation of marginalized communities, period. Like, to me, they are the thought leaders in that work. So Doc Now is going to be on deck with doing a collaborative effort with the workshops. And so much of their work has been with community-driven archive and community work. So this will be the first time they're having an opportunity to take the models that they've been utilizing and bringing it within with student orgs and academic spaces. So I'm totally excited to see what comes out of that. We also have a micro grant, 80K. So if you have a project, digitization project of some records, please hit us up. We are here to support you. That is going to be, you can use that money to support a staff member, for a vendor, however you need it, let us know. The applications are live now. So we're totally excited and looking forward to supporting a couple of digitization grants. The podcast is another thing that we have. I'm just trying to build out our podcast and build our community and build our network. We have, I feel like I'm forgetting something. We're doing building out an oral history project, building out our digital infrastructure. There's so much content that we have that has not been added to our website. So to have a grant to try to get a designated group of folks that can just do that work is so important in this grant. And I'm just so thankful for Mellon giving us this kind of support. It's more than what we could have thought we were going to get originally. So we have a lot of deliverables. So, but we're excited to get this work done.
And be sure to check out standarchives.com to find the applications for the micro grant. It's going to be under the tab of Mellon grant. And also you can find Doc Now on the interwebs at docnow.io. That's docnow.io. And so now we're going back to Keandra, putting you in the hot seat. We just entered, I guess, what you feel comfortable sharing as your background, what interested you in applying for this job, and what are your interests in working with Project Stand and what your goals are.
Thank you, Valencia. That's a lot to touch on. So if I'm talking for too long, somebody, give me the message. Like
this is your space. You take up as much space as you need.
Yes.
I'm Keandra Bills Freeman, and I identify as a mother, a spouse, a writer, and a memory worker in the Black archival tradition. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, specifically around the time of the uprisings related to the acquittal of the police officers responsible for the brutal assault of Rodney King. And I always like to bring that into the conversation because I feel like lived experience is an important part of the historical record. And it has influenced me as an archivist, and I just always want to bring that into the conversation as much as possible. But it really helped me shape my understanding of the power of resistance. And it has inspired a lifelong commitment for me to support grassroots activism and a career in public service. So most of my involvement has been related to improving the material conditions of Black people in the United States, but I also have a pretty extensive history of working on environmental justice movements in the US and abroad. I have a background, before I became a full-time archivist, I was a Peace Corps volunteer back in the day and also spent many years as a US diplomat. So I did mostly focused on environmental work and some immigration work during that time. So in terms of archival collections, over the past few years, I've been really lucky to work on some awesome collections with New York Public Library, Smithsonian, Library of Congress, and the People's Archive at DC Public Library. And to shout out some of those projects, which are all, I think, now open to the public, the Rosa Parks papers, the Mary Church Terrell papers, and DC-based lesbian periodical Women in the Life, that's at DC Public Library, and a People's History of Harlem Oral History Project. So if you have time and you're interested, Google those projects. They're all available to the public. And that's also important to me, to work on collections that are made available and accessible to folks to be able to access that rich history. So on top of my work with institutions, it's very important to me to maintain an independent archival practice. One of my passions is helping Black creatives create and maintain their digital archival practices. I have heard too many horror stories of it's time for acquisition and people just don't have their papers together for many reasons. They don't really know actually the value of the historical record that they have in their homes, or it's too late and some things have been lost. So I work with early and mid-career creatives to kind of protect that information. And because most of the work is done digitally these days, I focus on digital preservation. Building on that work, at the end of 2019, I launched the Black Women Writers Project, which is a digital archival initiative that is focused on highlighting the contributions of Black women and gender expansive writers to the historical and literary canon. So you can check that website out, blackwomenwritersproject.com. And we really, in that work, looking to uplift and celebrate the contributions and legacies of Black women writers and gender expansive writers. So, and in that work, also not just focusing on institution-based archives, but community archives and personal archival materials that are available in the public domain or on the website or on websites. So that's like way too long of a background. Really. Oh, I guess I should.
No, it's not way too long. Just to catch everyone up in our chats, we've been like pew 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 pew, air horns. It's like you're just so humble. You're just like, yeah, and I did this and I did that, and it's just like, you're amazing.
Thank you.
You and
You know,
Lael,
I really, I'm
amplify yourselves.
yeah, thank you. So I always leave this for last because I think it's the least important part, but I am an alumna of Fordham University, Columbia University, and as of today, University of Maryland, where I got my MLIS. And I recently finished a graduate certificate in museum studies at Harvard, and that informs my digital exhibit practice. So moving on to Project STAN, which is what we're all here for.
You are part of Project Stand, so we're also here for you.
Exactly. I feel like we should do an in-depth podcast interview at some point.
Yes.
Absolutely. So my interest
She got me sweating over here. I'm like, ooh. I'm like, yeah, I do remember reading all that on her CV. That's why she got this job. Just boss, yes, boss.
Thank you. Y'all are so kind. So I was excited about finding out about Project STAN last year when I started my MLIS journey. One of the first papers I had to read was our wonderful Lael's work on reparative archives. So through that scholarship, I learned more about Lael and Project STAN. And it really gave me hope for the direction of the field because, you know, as I said, I'm a memory worker in the Black archival tradition, which means we're acutely aware of the shortcomings in archival violence, you know, and erasure that is prevalent in our field at the moment and historically. And so for me, it was kind of that bright spot of like, wow, this is something tangible that is happening beyond just like metadata projects, like no shade, but, you know, this was something that felt like really amazing to see folks come together to really build this new vision, to build it, you know, and not just talk about it and not just say this is what we want and we would love to see in the future, but like, how do we make it happen? So for me, Project STAN was like, I never really thought I could find something, a job or even an initiative that could really bring together my background in that way, like all the things I'm interested in, my values really, like, and that's like values are very important to me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is very much aligned with the way that I see my role in archives and as a Black woman living in America and what I want to contribute, period, not just as an archivist. So yeah, I love that about Project STAN. And so here we are a year later and the position opened up and it was completely a surprise for me and it's been a lovely, lovely journey to work with Lael and to work with the larger consortium. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting more and more folks that are taking part. So I think you asked me about the goals for Project STAN. So I have a lot of goals, but it's really, I think what it comes down to is that I want to help further leverage the brilliance of the folks in the consortium and to really use our collective intellectual and institutional resources to realize the vision that we have for an archival practice that centers the ethical documentation of student activism and also acknowledges the contributions of students to social movements at large. Like these movements are not happening in silos, right? This is part of that, you know, it's the heartbeat really of most social movements at least in the modern era. So much has been done on campuses and in campus communities. So I really am excited about how we can leverage the members and really figure out even more ways to highlight this very important aspect of our culture and our historical record. Also looking forward to finding meaningful ways to engage current student activists, or at least, and even, you know, activists, maybe if they're not still in school, but in the last few years, because a lot of times when we realize something is historically relevant, the time has passed, people have given away, don't have those records anymore. So I think it's not only important to engage current student activists or at least modern student activists, not just for our own benefit and like what we can do for our collections, but because protecting the historical record is great for all of society, right? It's great for those people's grandchildren, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be for us to keep, but for someone to just go on record, to just go on record, period, whether or not that's in an institution or not, community-based archive, or just passing along family records. Because I feel like many of us can think about these kind of urban legends about people have done this or that in our families, but there's no way you can really know for sure, you know, or like they pass and you find a box of records. like, news clippings. And so if we can prepare folks very early in their lives to understand that what they have is important and that their stories are important, then it really benefits everyone. It doesn't just benefit the institutions who decide to collect it. It will also allows us to really protect legacies. So that's why I think engaging students is important as well. And, it's been mentioned a few times in this conversation, but I really think continuing to build out tools like the Archiving Student Activism Toolkit is really important because, speaking from someone who just finished an MLIS, I'm like, you spend a lot of time in these lectures or reading papers, and it can be very hard to understand how you move forward, like what you can actually do about these challenges like erasure and incomplete histories and all these marginalized communities that we just don't have enough information about. And so I think toolkits, anything that can help people process, like, okay, what are the steps? Where do I even start? It's like anything that helps people move forward with action beyond just the theory, I think is really, really significant. At least from my very new, very freshly minted institution-based archival perspective. So yeah.
You are a wonderful person, and I'm so excited to continue to work with you. So many gems were dropped and so many goals and dreams that are in alignment with what we're trying to do at Project STAN. So we are coming to the end of our time, but one thing that we always like to do at the podcast is do the Blueprint 5, where we're going to ask everyone 5 questions. It doesn't have to be rapid answers, but maybe like the first thing that comes to your mind, and we'll just go around. I was about to say the room. I guess it's a Zoom room. So number 1 is, what are you doing for self-care right now?
Eating gummy bears. I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, that counts. Yeah.
Definitely counts.
Mhm. I stopped myself from working now at a certain time in the evenings. So there's always a lot going on, but what I've done is I've given myself permission to stop working at a certain time and then just pick it up the next day. And people don't demand, my attention, especially in a work capacity, like after I'm home, after a certain time in the evening. So I've sort of stopped myself from working at a designated time each night and make sure I give myself some time to actually do some self-care and do some things that I enjoy doing too.
Well, I have a 6-month-old and I just finished a master's degree while having a very young child. So for me, self-care just looks like having a break, like just not either taking care of a tiny human or writing a paper. So anything that I'm doing that's not that feels like self-care. So getting the rest and on the weekends, I very slowly read books these days. Maybe I get in one a month, and that feels really good right now.
And Holly?
Well, for the last, I guess, almost year, in the crux of the pandemic, aka the panorama, aka the Panera. That's part of my self-care too, just trying to have some levity and making up some names, different names for the pandemic. But in all seriousness, I started a meditation practice with Dr. Tiffany Johnson, who started like a circle for women of color in academia to a space for meditation and yoga nidra. And we would meet for about 40 minutes on Tuesday. And that really has made a great difference as someone who is prone to worry and spirals. And, like we've all said, there's a lot going on in the world as well as our institution. So I found having a meditation practice, and I hope to be a little more consistent on my own, but baby steps somewhere. So that's just been really helpful. And just knowing that that's the time that I have at least that once a week. And even to the point now when other friends are reaching out like, oh, I know you have meditation at 7:30 on Tuesday. So, and just, trying to set that boundary for myself as well. And I want to take a minute to give a plug. I highly recommend Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Dr. Nedra Glover Tawwab, a Black woman therapist. It's an excellent book. So that's part 2 of self-care, learning how to set better boundaries.
After hearing everybody's
I
responses,
resonate with that.
after hearing everybody's responses, I gotta do better than just eating gummy bears. I'm working on it.
Guilt-free enjoying of a food
Mhm.
snack is absolutely self-care. And in the
Yes, it
spirit of
is.
solidarity, I'm going to have a really good meal tonight in honor of you, Leah.
You know I'm a foodie. You have to text me what it is too.
All right. Question number 2 is, what is a piece of advice you'd want everyone to know?
I don't mind going first because this just resonated. Talk to yourself that you would talk to yourself like you would a beloved friend, and just show yourself self-compassion, because we are extremely hard on myself. I know I'm hard on myself, but I would never talk to any of you the way I talked to myself. So that is something that a therapist said to me years ago, and it continues to resonate. Just to, be kind to yourself, which is easier said than done, but when the way she phrased it, just talk to yourself like you would someone you love. That really was like, oh, I get it now.
I think my piece of advice is to always keep something for yourself. And I'm a creative, as you can see, I like have my hands in a lot of pots. And I think one of the challenges is feeling like every time you find something that brings you joy, it has to be capitalized on in some way, or you have to be great at it. It's not good enough to just do it because you like to do it. And so I think for me, that's a lesson I'm trying to learn and internalize, is like, there have to just be things I have for myself, whether that's drawing or whatever sort of outlet. Like, it doesn't always have to be like, well, how do I become the best at this? What if I just never become good and just enjoy the process? I've seen a lot of people doing this with learning how to skate this summer, and I think that's also amazing.
I think I'll say, make sure you're doing what you really want to do. Because if nothing else, I feel like during this pandemic, it's been definitely giving us a lot of time that we didn't expect, in different ways. And just, I've had time to be reflective. And I know, living this capitalistic structure, we got to worry about how we keep our lights and bills paid and everything. So yes, we have to have jobs, and maybe our jobs may not look exactly like how we expected, but as everyone, it has been a thread, a theme that I think we've all shared, like our passions, like we're doing work that if it's not in our day-to-day job, but we've carved out space and time for stuff that we really care about and we're really passionate about, and just making sure you have that carved out for yourself, so that you don't feel like you're wasting away for somebody else's dream, but you're taking time to fulfill yours.
And for me, I would say trust yourself. For those of us who maybe have been taught by society or culture not to trust ourselves, I think our body tells us things and our intuition tells us things. And listening to your body tell you when it needs something, or listening to your intuition when it tells you something, I think that's really important. And sort of maybe we've been taught to distrust ourselves some too, but there's a lot of things that are, our bodies know we need, and maybe we need rest, and we should listen to that more, and pushing through just to finish this thing isn't necessarily worth it because your body is telling you need a break. So listening to yourself more and trusting that more, I think.
I feel like you just read me, Sarah. Your body's telling you to rest. All right. Number 3 is, what is your jam at the moment? What are we listening to? What's our favorite song?
I have to say, it's been on repeat a couple times for me, but Industry Baby, Little Nas X. Just being real. It is.
And me too. So I listened to Little Nas X several times. Also, just the new Billie Eilish album, which I wasn't really, honestly, just wasn't a super big fan beforehand. But there's a couple songs on her new album that I've played on repeat. So I don't know what that says about my mood, but that is what I've been listening to.
I had to open up my Spotify. I was like, but I've been playing We Made It by her. So that is my jam right now. It's inspiring.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm going to, Valencia, in the spirit of breaking rules, I don't have just one. So it's more, Lion Babe has a new album out, kind of alternative soul group with Vanessa Williams' daughter is in it. So they have a new album, Rainbow, and a new song with Ghostface Killah, the title track. Yes, I love Lion Babe. And I had to take it back to Aaliyah now that she's on streaming. So this is from my era, 1 in a Million. Hello.
Yes, Holly, yes.
Yes, the iconic, the original. Yes. So I'm all over the place in a good way.
Oh my God, I'm about to open up my Spotify too. Didn't know that Vanessa.
I was like, it's about time.
And Ghostface Killah is like, I'm tripping.
Yes, Lion Babe, Rainbow on all streaming platforms.
All right. And number 4, what is bringing you joy this month?
That's rough.
Oh no, I didn't mean to stop everyone.
I hate to keep putting stuff back on Keandra, but Keandra.
That's fine.
I know, I'm like, well, I have a lot of things. I'm like, but for me, obviously today I said finishing my MLIS today. Lots of joy. I'm so done, like done. And my baby just started learning, they just learned how to laugh. So they still don't like do it a lot. So when they do, it is just the most like the feeling of the deepest joy. Because you don't think like a human being has to learn how to laugh. You know?
That's so beautiful. Oh,
I'm going to need actual footage of said laughing, please.
If I can catch it.
I don't believe it. I need to see it.
And just the baby's so adorable. I got to see the baby during the meeting the other day, and just adorable. Just all the cuteness is in the baby. And when I said I didn't want to keep putting it back on Keandra, I just meant like literally like all things, because my joy this month is because Keandra started. I'm so happy that Keandra started. That is giving me joy this month. Just real talk. Just seriously. I'm so happy Keandra's here. So that is my joy.
Thank you.
And find out like we got Detroit Todd. Like there's just so many things. I'm just happy that Keandra's here.
And I would say just to that, really things like this, the interactions that you have with colleagues, but who are also friends and people you respect. And I was able to go see my mother and celebrate a milestone birthday of my family. So, just I think being present with the people that you care about and love, because it really is easy to be discouraged with so many, awful things honestly going on and so many people hurting. So trying to hold space for that and giving yourself space, but to find gratitude every day. So at the end of the day, I try to either write or articulate at least 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I usually end up with a good 10 or 15. So, it's helpful to be present, but also these kinds of conversations with, the people that you care about and that are doing great work, just to keep things in perspective.
I'm about to start that practice every day.
Yeah.
You right? I love that.
That's nice.
Or I say, girl, let me be honest. I try to write it so I have something to read, but I at least say it, I think it.
That however
I
you
didn't
do
get
it,
to
that's
the
nice
writing.
that's your intention every day. I love that. Like I'm co-opted that one.
No, please. I've gotten it from, like I said, many places, and some days are better than others, and some days it's a grouch and a crab, and like everything's bad. It's raining and contrary to what people might think, like I'm all sunshine and club, but we all have those moments. Anyway, didn't mean to slide into therapy session, but not that there's anything wrong with that.
I know we can do that too. We can do that too. We can do that too.
I can slide you all 4 of you a copay today, because I definitely. But in all seriousness, I think not just getting back to, I was having this conversation again. It's not just the work we do, but how we feel ourselves. And it's like, I know each of us love our work, and that informs it, but to not let those things overtake us. And I guess this is getting back to Avita, what you said about self-care, and just to find joy in the seemingly mundane. So like a cute baby's laugh and the cute pictures, Keandra, I was so happy to see, that it seems small, but it's not a small thing. It's really a blessing and a miracle. So just trying to find, I think that gratitude helps as a reminder.
And gummy bears.
And gummy bears.
And gummy bears. Yeah.
I need to know what brand you like, Leo.
They're very specific. They're from a grocery store that's actually in Ohio. Fresh Time. I don't know if there's more than one Fresh Time outside of Ohio, but that's where I'm in right now. And I swear they save just a little one. They're the freshest. I love them. They're so good. There's flavors I've never had before. I just love these gummy bears. I'll bring some to work on Monday.
And Sarah, what's bringing you joy this month?
So I haven't told anybody in this group this, but I have announced it to my friends and family. But I've entered into my second trimester, so I'm pregnant, and what's bringing me joy is the second trimester. So being done with the first, so that's what's bringing me joy, is like sort of getting over some of hopefully the worst of the physical. The physical ailments of that, and that is what's bringing me joy now. So
I am so excited for you, and I am not, Sarah, I'm telling you, a couple months ago I wanted to ask you,
did you?
there was a glow on and I was just like, but how do you do that? Because if I'm wrong, that's just gonna be, that won't look good. So I was like, I wanted to ask you. I have been wanting to say, and I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so happy for you. But it was a glow. There was something, and I was like, and I never see her stand up.
I don't.
But I was like, I don't know. I just like,
P.I. Leo. Just like,
yeah. It was, so many people don't see each other in public anymore, so it's not, you don't know what's going on all the time. So.
But just huge congratulations. But I wanted to ask you a couple months ago. This is just beautiful news.
Good. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm happy that we're moving on to it.
So elated. You can't top that. You just can't. What a
I
blessing.
feel like Sarah should go first for this next question then. And thank you so much for sharing with us. What's one thing you're excited about this fall?
I'm excited about it being fall. So I think getting through some of the it's been so hot and humid in Atlanta. I don't know where everybody is, but like in Atlanta, it's been very hot and humid, and I'm looking forward to fall, some cooler temperatures and some time with family. So I'm hoping this fall will be different than last fall, since at least in small groups, my family's vaccinated and things like that. So I'm looking forward to spending some time with family and taking some time off work and just sort of relaxing this fall. So I'm looking forward to that.
I guess I'll go next. And mine is somewhat random. I'm hoping to pick up, although pick up means that as if I did it before. I have a violin at home and I'm trying to learn how to play. And I said this fall, that's going to be the thing that I'm going to do. And hopefully that will be a part of my journey for self-care. And I think this is coming out this fall, so it's more than one thing. The Black Wonder Years, yep, I said it. I'm looking forward to the Black Wonder Years.
I didn't know about that one. I have to check for it.
It is. And I was like, what? This is real. So I'm like totally excited to see how this unfolds. But let's see.
Sorry, I was Googling it.
It's for people of a certain generation. So it's probably.
No, I wasn't Googling the Wonder Years. I was Googling
Oh.
the Wonder Years. Keandra
Oh,
and Holly?
I'm sorry, V. What was the question again? I got sidetracked.
No, you're fine. What's one thing you're excited about this fall?
Good question. I know we're all like stumped. I have to say this now. This might sound terrible because we have a whole semester to go through. But I'm looking forward to Christmas break. I try not to rush time, and I am really looking forward to Christmas break.
It's nothing
And I
wrong with
think
that.
like I just it was nice to be back with my family, and and I don't take that for granted because some people aren't able to see them consistently and we're all vaccinated, and even that was just quick. So it was just, it can be tiring, you're busy and you're doing it, but it's very restorative. And I think and then I feel like I can truly unplug. But I will also say, I will announce here to everyone, which I'm excited about and will share, Lehigh University is hosting the first inaugural Gloria Naylor in the Archives Symposium. So that will be, they are meeting in person, but they will also be virtual components. So I'm just really excited. I remember, who doesn't remember Women of Brewster Place and Bailey's Cafe? And I think she's just one of the earliest Black women writers. So yeah, right. Yeah, who remembers? Ooh, Women of Brewster Place. Boy, that the miniseries tear your heart up. But I'm really excited about this being the first inaugural one. And myself and one of our other sister colleagues, Gabrielle, Dudley, is on the advisory board. So it's just a really great group of people. So that is another thing to look forward to. And also the Black Women Radicals, led by the incredible Jamie Swift, is having its first symposium. I think, Kendra, is it in conjunction with Crew?
Yeah.
They do, in the Black Lesbian Archive. So really excited. Thank you. Yes, excited about those conversations. Yeah, with these, just great people and scholars. So.
Oh, you have to share about the Women of Brewster's Place coming up, because I'm not going to sing and embarrass myself, but that intro music always has stuck in my. I love that story. I've watched that a million times.
Yeah, me and my wife rewatched it last year, and it's just that scene with the scissors and the electrical outlet. It still takes me out.
Yes,
Very traumatizing.
There are so many scenes. There are so many.
Yeah, there are.
I say I love it, but I can't. That's one of the things I just can't rewatch it. But it's like classic. So anyway, excuse me.
So I guess I'm the last person to go. I was really trying to find a better one, but the first thing that came to mind is that though I am a writer, I mostly have a poetic practice, but my first book chapter related to archives is being published in early December, in the Black Librarian in America anthology. And the reason why I'm really excited about it is, like, of course, publishing is exciting, but I'm really committed to a citational practice. And so I got to shout out Lael, Zakia Collier, Christina Sharp, Alexis Pauline Gums. So all these folks whose work has informed my archival practice. So I'm just really, that's the part I'm most excited about, is like, this is for y'all. This is a collective opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. I can't wait. There's some amazing things happening this fall. Amazing things for all of us to be excited about this fall.
There's so many announcements that were happening in this episode, and I'm just
And honored that y'all
Yay.
shared them. Like, yes, just honored.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
And did you
so this
say,
is
I'm
just,
sorry.
oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't know. Keandra said poetic practice. Like, do you write poetry, Keandra?
I do. My first book is called Things You Left Behind. So it's out there. You can find it if you want to. But it was published in 2017.
Things You Left Behind by Keandra Bills Freeman.
I'm
You
gonna
can find
have
it on Amazon. Go buy her book. We gotta do the plugs.
I'm gonna have to. We're gonna have a lot of links.
So many links.
I used to do open mic way back in the day, and I know nobody has video of that, so there will be no Amazon.
Yeah. Well, I still want to hear a piece. Now you put yourself on the spot. I'm gonna have to hear a piece one day.
Wait, so instead of doing the cipher layout, you could do an open mic. Because we still have to do a cipher, allegedly.
Maybe drunk poetry. I spent a minute. I mean, I still write on down. I do a little, but yeah, I'm looking for your book now.
I'm a Gemini. I can't help it. I do a million things at once.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. And this is just usually how our meetings go. We build community, we laugh, we have fun, and we have joy within the spaces that we create. So keep on the lookout for the next episode of The Blueprint, and we will see you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.